There is a UN group called the UN Relief Work Agency, UNRWA, and its workers openly celebrated the slaughter of Israelis on October 7th. The UN agency employs members of Hamas, and its educational materials teach math by counting dead terrorists and grammar by calling jihad the doorway to paradise.
UN workers and UNRWA both came under fire at a hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday. Lawmakers heard the testimony of what's being called rampant anti-Semitism and systematic anti-Israel bias at the UN. Dale Hurd reports.
The hearing focused on one agency in particular, where UN employees openly celebrated the October 7th attack on Israel. In its new report, the group UN Watch documents how 20 teachers and staff members with UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, rejoiced over the massacre of Israeli civilians in their social media accounts.
Allah is great. Allah is great. Reality surpasses our wildest dreams, posted UNRWA Gaza teacher Osama Ahmed.
UN Watch Executive Director Hillel Neuer told the Subcommittee on Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations that the celebration of the attack by UNRWA staff should not have been a surprise, considering what was already known about the agency's association with Hamas.
UNRWA staff regularly call to murder Jews and create teaching materials that glorify terrorism, encourage martyrdom, demonize Israelis, and incite anti-Semitism.
Middle East expert Dr. Jonathan Schanzer.
UNRWA employees have been exposed as members of Hamas, the terrorist group that slaughtered 1,400 Israelis in cold blood on October 7th. This might explain how UNRWA's educational materials refer to Israel as the enemy, teach math by counting martyred terrorists, and include the phrase jihad as one of the doors to paradise in grammar lessons.
Neuer says that since the Hamas massacre, the overwhelming majority of statements by UN bodies and officials have pointed the finger at Israel, following a pattern there in which Israel is held to a standard not applied to any other nation.
At the UN General Assembly last year, there was one resolution on Iran, one on Syria, one on North Korea, and 15 on Israel. 0 resolutions were adopted on China, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and 180 other countries.
There is no question that certain UN member states, bodies, and the General Assembly have a negative, disproportionate focus on Israel and routinely support singling it out more than any other country in the world.
In 2022 alone, UNRWA received $344 million in funding from the United States. This for an agency that experts say includes staff members who clearly support Hamas. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, David Freeman is the former U.S. ambassador to Israel. He joins us now for more insight on this. Let's start with the UN. Why is a UN agency allowed to promote jihad, allowed to promote attacks against Israel?
Well, good morning, Gordon. Thanks for having me. The answer is because it's sponsored by the UN. There's almost nothing at the UN that takes place that isn't hostile to Israel. You know, I remember during the Trump administration, we had a long discussion about UNRWA early on. We looked at what they did. We looked at their curriculum. We looked at, you know, they put on these plays where half the kids dress up as Israelis and half the kids dress up as terrorists with fake guns. They shoot the Israelis. The Jews lie on the ground dead, and the parents get up and applause. This is a typical 4th grade play sponsored by UNRWA. So we cut off their funding. You know, we cut off their funding early on. We weren't going to spend money supporting Hamas. And, you know, much to my regret, when we left office, the Biden administration turned it on again. But it is, we are literally funding not just Hamas, but we are funding the ideology, the nihilistic ideology that results in the death of innocent Jews.
Well, when do you think the American people are going to wake up to it? The numbers are absolutely staggering. The years this agency has been in existence, supposedly to help refugees, but it just seems to be perpetuating the myth and also perpetuating hate. Why should we ever fund it?
We shouldn't, and we didn't, and no one has ever been able to explain to me from the Biden administration why we restored that funding. We restored other funding too. I mean, Biden is giving another $500 million to the Palestinians in other buckets. You know, the Palestinian, these agencies per capita receive more international funding than any other cause, any other global cause. I mean, they have been, you know, receiving billions of dollars for years. I'm sure you've seen the reporting over the last couple of days how, you know, Ismail Haniyeh and Khalid Mashal, the leaders of Hamas living in the Four Seasons Hotel in Qatar, have a net worth of over $11 billion. Okay, this is a lot of that money is ours. A lot of that money is American money. And we don't wake up to it because these are sort of the dirty secrets that are maintained in the State Department. They don't come up for hearings very often. They're not subject to a lot of congressional oversight. They get packed into some, you know, massive package with 75 other items in the bill, and people just kind of let it slide through. But just make no mistake, we are literally funding Hamas and its ideology against Israel and the Jewish people.
And it looks like the leadership has been at this for some time. I remember a report, Yasser Arafat died a billionaire and lived in luxury, not in the West Bank, but in France. It's astounding that the State Department doesn't know that. Why do you think they're trying to hide it? Or if they do know it, why are they trying to hide it?
Look, you know, I spent 4 years in the State Department, and I learned a lot that people wouldn't know otherwise. You know, there is a Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs which runs the entire, you know, Middle East, and Israel is kind of parked in there, one out of, you know, 23 countries. And everybody that works in this department, they're all Arabists. They all go from, you know, Arab country to Arab country to Arab country. Occasionally, somebody will spend a year or two in Israel, but their perspective is entirely skewed to the Palestinians, to all the worst of those within the Arab world. And when we came into office, we had to break that. We had to break the entire system. Now, apparently, we didn't break it. We just kind of set it back 4 years because as soon as we left, all those, you know, all the rats came out from underneath the, from under the basement, and they went back to work again. The State Department, you know, since the beginning of the State of Israel, when it fought so hard against Harry Truman and against the founding of the State of Israel, the State Department has elements in it that are decidedly not just hostile to Israel, but anti-Semitic.
Well, there's a long history here. We can go back to Kermit Roosevelt, who actually, as a CIA operative, funded a lobbying group right here in the United States to lobby against Israel and support the Arab nations in the Middle East. The history is absolutely astounding, and it just seems to continue on and on and on and on and on when the American people are quite clearly supporting Israel. Is there anything we can do against this bureaucracy? What would you recommend someone watching right now saying, oh, what can I do? How can I be a part of change?
You know, Mike Pompeo didn't let this happen. You know, I work with him, you know, very carefully, you know, closely for the 2.5 years that he was Secretary of State. When we were in office, we fought this and we won. We knocked off the underfunding. We knocked off the Palestinian funding. We you know, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, Golan Heights, determining that Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria is not illegal. We got all these things done, but it starts at the top. It starts with a president that supports those views. And regrettably, the only way to really change this is to change the administration.
Well, isn't there a change needed at the staff level? I mean, there was a memo leaked recently that was decidedly anti-Israeli. It's astounding after October 7th that anyone would write this, but they wrote it. Shouldn't the change happen at the staff level, the people that actually wrote that, to say this isn't in America's national interest?
It should, but those decisions are made by the Secretary of State and the upper echelons of the State Department, and they're not going to do it. They're just not going to do it. They're not the current people. I mean, look, you know, personnel is policy. You know, it's the people there that make the policy, and the people who are there now. Again, these are the people who decided to refund UNRWA. Okay, I mean, that sort of tells you who we're dealing with. They restored massive funding to the Palestinians. They demanded no accountability whatsoever in exchange for that money. And you see where the money went. The money went to kill 1,400 Jews and kidnap 240 others. So the personnel are not currently in place to make the changes that are so important and so much in the interest of America, let alone the interest of Israel. And you can only change the personnel through an election.
Well, let's talk about what's rising right here on our own college campuses. It seems incredible to me to hear anti-Israel, anti-Jewish rallies happening on our college campuses. What should we do to protect Jewish college students?
We need to demand a lot more accountability from the administration of these schools. They've really failed dramatically to protect Jewish people, even in the aftermath of demands by people on their boards, people who were donors, and the more so-called, I put this in quotes, the more elite the school, including my alma mater, Columbia University, it seems that the worse they are. Look, I think there needs to be a hard look at government funding for these universities. I think that's the language that they understand. I think there has to be a hard look at all the student visas that we get. I understand that at Columbia, there's a very large number of Palestinians who are there on student visas who are now supporting Hamas. Now, if you support a terrorist organization, you can't get a student visa. So undoubtedly, they all lied on their applications for visas, and that should be looked at, and they should be sent home. We're coddling the most extreme points of view within our society, the most dangerous points of view. We're giving them a voice, and we're shouting down, the people who are the most loyal to the United States and the most loyal to Israel. It can't continue like this. I mean, these are the future leaders of America, and this is a disease. And look, I think one thing which troubles me is how quickly this developed. I mean, this went from 0 to 60 in about 10 seconds. As soon as this war began, even before Israel began to defend itself, these people were out there with their keffiyehs and with their Palestinian flags. They were out there ripping down the posters of kidnapped children. I mean, imagine a college student doesn't have the sensitivity or the compassion or the judgment to let stand a picture of a kidnapped 8-year-old child just to remember them, so we don't lose sight of these poor people, and they're ripping them down. I mean, I think that what this demonstrates is not only the failure of the American universities, but the fact that we have a much larger problem than we acknowledge. I mean, there's a large population in America that's becoming radicalized, and not only do they hate Israel, I mean, make it clear, they hate America too, and I just think we've ignored it, certainly for the last 3 years.
Well, I also think we've ignored the funding of it. You don't have this just sort of pop up this way without a huge base of support and funding, whether that's coming out of London or coming out of other Middle Eastern nations. I don't know what the source is, but it seems to be well funded. And because it happened so quickly, because the narrative so quickly changed from the horror of October 7th to somehow blaming the victim, that Israel's, it seems to be coordinated. Let's talk about something positive. Go ahead.
No, I agree with you. It's coordinated.
Let's talk about something positive people can do. There are many groups, Christian and Jewish, calling for a pro-Israel rally in Washington, D.C. next week. That's on Tuesday. How important is this to show support for Israel right now?
I think it's enormously important, and I think what's important is not what's said at the rally. What's important is how many people show up. This is a numbers game. People will take notice if there's a large crowd. I think people will also take notice if there's not a large crowd. I mean, this is a chance for people to observe, in quantitative terms, which are more objective. Is there really a large mass of support for the Jewish people in the state of Israel? So yeah, I think it's incredibly important to show up. And I would say that it doesn't matter, like everybody who shows up is not going to agree with each other on every point. You're going to have people on the Jewish left, on the Jewish right. You're going to have people who are Christians, who are Jews, secular, religious. I think you take all those points and you leave them at the doorstep and you just show up to support Israel. I think that is the point of agreement, and everybody who can participate should. I think it's incredibly important.
I do too, and I agree with you. It's time for all of us to stand for Israel and say, yes, this should never happen again. Hamas should not exist anymore, and no one should fund this kind of radical ideology. Well, Ambassador Freeman, thanks so much for your insight, and thanks for joining with us.
Well, Gordon, thank you for having me. God bless you. Appreciate
God bless
it.
you. Thank you. Let me underline what Ambassador Freeman said, that there is no group of people on the planet that has received more aid per capita than the Palestinians. So don't buy into the narrative that somehow or other they're suffering. What's going on is their leadership is intentionally keeping them in refugee camps. That is what is really happening. And their leadership is profiting on our tax dollars. You don't accumulate 11 billion in a personal account unless you're absolutely corrupt. That's what they are. And they're manipulating their own people. They're sending their own people to die so that they can profit. And here's the other thing, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. They are killing Gazans who are trying to leave the war zone. They're making sure their human shields stay in place. This is evil. The face of evil has been revealed. We need to stand against it. If you want more information about the rally on Tuesday, we can have it for you on cbnnews.com. You can also contact your local Jewish community center. They are going to be sponsoring buses to D.C. Let's stand with them. Let them know that we love them. God loves them. We want to be with them in their time of need. So get informed and please participate.